Hi there, you're listening to Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. My guest this time out is the first anonymous interviewee that I've had in over 20 years as a journalist, the writer behind the Czech Please social media accounts, who's been reviewing restaurants in Prague for over a decade and a half. Also going by the pen name Brusta, he's built up a large and dedicated following as Czechia's best-known English-language food blogger. When we met recently at a cool Prague cafe, we discussed the city's dining scene at some length. But I first asked Czech Please a little bit about himself for this edition of Prague Talk. When did you first come here to Prague?
I first came here in 1995. I was visiting a Czech woman I had met in the United States and decided to come over and see how things were over here and loved it. But it took several more years of looking around until I made the big move in 1999 to come and settle here.
Had you always been a foodie before you moved here?
Yes, I definitely was always interested in all different types of cuisine and specifically in restaurants. I do cook, but mostly I'm just fascinated by restaurants, how they work, how the kitchen works, how the atmosphere, the business, how it all interplays. It's just really interesting to me.
I'd say when you came here at the end of the 90s or during the 90s and then moved here at the end of the 90s, generally what were restaurants like here in Prague at that time?
There was a very small group of sophisticated restaurants, or for that time sophisticated. I could almost count on maybe one or two hands restaurants that you would consider sort of Western style fancy. Campo Park was around then. There was a place called Pravda. There was a place called Barok. And they were, compared to American prices and in dollar terms, extraordinarily cheap. Like sitting in Campo Park, a main course, a very expensive main course in 1999 was 300 crowns. The dollar hit like 35 to 40 to the crown around that time, early 2000. So you're looking at $10 to sit on the river in the most beautiful restaurant, and it was really sort of a heady time.
Did you also, though, go to more regular kind of neighborhood restaurants? And what were they like at that time?
They're not that different than sort of the regular Czech restaurants today. So I've eaten my share of Svičkova and Kolino and not just in Prague. And I was in Brno quite a lot back in those days. And it was always pretty good stuff in some of those local places and crazy cheap.
What about the service? Because that's something a lot of foreigners would have commented on in those days, that the service wouldn't have been what one might be used to from, for example, America.
Well, I would say I don't remember too many bad experiences. I used to frequent a very Czech pub in Malá and the waiters were sort of surly but lovable, if you could put it that way, and they were characters, and we loved their style and their personalities.
When did you start food blogging, or what form did your food reviewing take in the beginning?
So in 2007, I was looking for a creative outlet, and I was trying to think about how to express myself in writing in a way that I would find satisfying. And I was a consumer of blogs. Some of them were very personal. I thought I didn't feel like, writing personal stuff on the internet. And one day I read the New York Times, and it was an article about restaurant bloggers in New York City, and this light bulb went off over my head. And I said, I love restaurants. I like to write. I'm going to start documenting what I eat. And I looked around, and I'm sure there were no other English language restaurant blogs in Prague at that time, so I laid claim to being the first English. There were Czech. And I just started a Blogspot account and started writing stories of my dinners with my friends and partners, and putting some photos, sometimes really bad photos with my bad camera. But I just got a real kick out of it, and it started getting a lot of positive feedback, and I enjoyed that.
You used to go by the name Brusta, now you're Czech Please. Why are you anonymous?
Well, I thought about it very carefully at the time, and I realized that the blogs that I enjoyed the most that I was consuming were anonymous. And one of them was a bouncer in New York City, was telling the inside story of what it's like to be a bouncer in New York. And one was by a lawyer in a New York City law firm, and could tell you the inside story in a way that they couldn't tell you if they used their real name. And I liked the mystery and the mystique of anonymity, sort of like, who is this international man of mystery that goes around and spies on restaurants? So I thought that was a cool idea. And, I just value my privacy, so I'd rather do it that way.
Have you ever considered coming out?
I've considered it many times, but there's upsides and downsides. I think, personality-driven social media is definitely more popular. But, at the same time, at the expense of my privacy, and I just decided it's not worth it.
You're on, I guess, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Do you prefer any of those, and if so, for what reason?
I don't necessarily prefer any. I've tried Threads and seems to get no traction. I like anything that gets a response. Actually, I think I used to get more response on Instagram, but now all the comments that I get are on Facebook. So actually I do prefer Facebook because I love interacting in comments with people. But by the way, like the character that I use for my blog is Brusta, and the name of the account is Czech Please. So they're not mutually exclusive. They go together.
You used to do this best burgers of the year kind of chart or table, which was very popular. How do you manage to stay slim on an evident diet of non-stop burgers?
Oh, there's a very good answer to that, is genetics. I've always had a fast metabolism, and I've eaten a lot of burgers. I've cut back. My cholesterol levels were getting a little crazy, and I've discontinued the burger ranking list. Partly for that reason. I stopped it during COVID, and I just decided not to restart it again.
But even now, for example, how many times a month would you eat a burger?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been kind of getting back into the burger swing of things. There was a period where I was really laying off, but I've had quite a few in this last month. I would say 4 in a month, 4 or 5.
That's pretty average, I guess. It's not so extreme. One thing I wanted to discuss with you was tipping. Recently, or a few months ago on social media, I wrote that I had rounded up from about 1,100 to 1,200 because it was just like a kind of quick in and out meal, nothing special, just during the week. And the waitress had given me a look like, what the hell is this? And I asked people, what do you think? Is rounding up still the done thing here, or am I a bad tipper? What's your view on this?
I generally tip 10%. I do occasionally round up if it looks close to 10%. Occasionally it might be a little less or it might be a little more. But I try to err on the side of generosity just for karmic reasons.
What about bang for buck in Prague? You travel quite a bit, I'm sure. Is Prague reasonably priced in terms of what you get?
It's a really interesting question because my comments on Facebook are filled every single post about prices. And, I eat out a lot, and I can afford to eat out a lot. I pay for things myself. I don't take freebies. I don't take sponsorship. It's just my hobby. It's just what I do. But not everybody has the same economic level, and it angers some people when they see the inflation that's hit. I mean, it's very real. I mean, the prices have gone up a lot, no doubt. But when I take a look at the big picture, I was in New York this year. I was traveling around the United States. I've been in Paris or Amsterdam. Prices are still not at those levels, and we eat very well in Prague. There's very sophisticated dining here, and I consider myself lucky that however much prices have gone up in the last 5 years, they're not New York, London, Paris levels.
Generally, what would you say is the standard in Prague? Obviously, it is in Paris, but how good is Prague for dining now?
Well, this is subjective, but my feeling is that you can eat in Prague as well or better sometimes than you can eat in major cities of the world. I'll give you an example. I'm really interested in burgers, and I went to find the best burger in New York, and one of them, I've tried many, and one of them is the Black Label Burger at the Minetta Tavern in Greenwich Village. It's a great burger. Then I went to Cantina in Prague, their aged beef burger, which is also Minetta Tavern is aged beef. I found it equally satisfying for a fraction of the price. It's a world-class burger, and it's my favorite burger in Prague. I'm a fan of the La Bottega restaurants, very sophisticated Italian food. Everything's imported. They do really nice risottos, pastas, meat, fish. It's expensive, and the prices have really skyrocketed there, but it isn't, New York prices. I mean, entrees in New York, $40, $50. Here they're $20, $30.
Maybe you've already kind of answered the question, but what is your favorite restaurant, or what are your favorite restaurants in this city?
Some of my favorite restaurants in Prague are El Camino, La Bottega di Finestra, Cantina, Mr. Hot Dog, Burger Man, Sumi Garden.
What about cafes? Because I know you like your pastry.
I love Tise, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. They have a lovely garden near Rigorisati, and they have great breakfast, and they have great pastries, big variety, great quality. It's one of my favorite spots. And there's just a huge choice of bakeries around the Jerzy Hospodybrad area.
Especially I find with cafes, it's virtually impossible to keep up with all the new places that are opening in different districts. How do you stay on top of all the restaurants and cafes? Do people send you tips? Do you keep your eye out all the time?
Well, on my social media accounts, I almost exclusively follow foodie accounts or restaurants. So all the food so-called influencers and people who just like to eat out, plus the restaurants, it's just I scroll through those every day, and every once in a while I see something that intrigues me. But, I don't eat out as much as I used to in the earlier days of my blog. But, I've got much more work and personal life commitments that just have really sort of slowed me down a bit.
Finally, some people listening to this will be wondering, does this guy like Czech food? If you do, what dishes?
I love Svičkovo, number one, a really good one. I've had some bad ones, but there's some real, I love the sweet, creamy sauce. If the meat's a little bit better quality than the typical Czech version, I like that a little bit more. Žižek, schnitzel, I haven't had it in a while, but I like the version at Vinohradský pivovar because it also came with a sort of a German vinegar-style potato salad that you rarely find, and I loved. So Koprovka, I had that this week, actually, at Shodo. Yeah, I like Czech food. It's just I've been here a long time, and it's very heavy, and so it's usually not the first thing I think of when I go out to eat.
Many thanks indeed to Czech Please for agreeing to speak to me for this edition of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. There are over 100 other editions out there, so if you're new to the pod and enjoyed this conversation, there are scores more out there for you to check out. But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you so much for listening, and talk to you again pretty soon.